people eat my food, I hope that they can tell that there was a lot of intention behind it. I'm Molly Boz, and this is How I Holiday. I grew up in upstate New York. I don't come from like a rich culture of food, like in my family heritage. And so the food that I cook is inspired by my experiences of eating in the world and around the world. I feel like I cook in this bold, unabashed way, but it isn't necessarily tied to like a specific culture or cuisine. The moment when I realized that cooking was what I wanted to do for my career was when I was living in Italy. I lived with an Italian grandmother in a homestay program. I would come home from school and walk into the apartment and it would just like smell incredible of tomatoes and garlic and basil. And we would have dinner together every night, just the two of us sitting across from each other at a little table in her tiny kitchen. The meals that she put on the table just blew my mind. Way before I worked at Bon Appetit, I worked in restaurants for like 7 years. Everything from like super fine dining, Michelin starred, tweezer plated food to really casual gastropubby fare. And I think I learned that I am an efficient cook who can quickly and consistently move through cooking a recipe. And so that was sort of, I think, the pivotal moment when I realized I think I'm good at this.
That's all she wrote.
Breakfast growing up was always like a huge part of my life. My dad, when we were children, he would get up at like 5:30 and he would make hot breakfast for me and my brother. He would form biscuits into like an M for me and an A for my brother Adam. Oh my God. I have since sort of translated my love of those breakfast foods into my own recipes. And so what I'm gonna cook later on is my version of a buttermilk biscuit, which is really nostalgic for me because hot biscuits in the morning was a joy growing up. My biggest win so far has been seeing my book come out into the world. Like, I would like to say that it was getting on the New York Times bestseller list, but the bigger moment was just receiving a copy of my book and being like, I made this. This is my first book, baby. Cook this book. I did not think I was ready to write a cookbook. It was always part of sort of like my 10-year plan, and I thought I would write one maybe in like 5 years. But I got an email from an editor at Clarkson Potter. They're under Penguin Random House. She was like, would you like to have a breakfast meeting? And I was like, oh my God. And she asked me if I wanted to write sort of a different book, and it didn't feel exactly right, but I was like, oh, so they think I can write a book. And it's just kind of like all came pouring out of me, and I just like went onto my computer and started writing and wrote this whole outline. I went back to her and was like, I don't think the idea that we discussed over breakfast is exactly right for me, but I think that I want to write my own book, and I think this is it. And that was it. Receiving a copy of my book, I can't even describe what that feeling was like. I put so much of my like soul into that book, and so seeing that come out and seeing it in the world is just like absolutely insane. Today, I'm gonna show you how to make sesame buttermilk biscuits with chive butter. It starts out with very cold butter. So I have 1.5 sticks of unsalted butter here, and I'm just chopping it into 1/2-inch cubes. And I'm transferring them to a bowl, and I'm gonna put them in the fridge because I want the butter to be as cold as humanly possible when it goes into the dough. That way it can provide the proper amount of steam to make the biscuits rise, and then you'll get those like amazing striated layers. Room temperature butter will not work here. We celebrate Christmas in a pretty big way. My parents turned Christmas into like the most magical time of year ever. They went to such extremes that the love of this holiday and everything around it is like so deep within me. One year, I can't remember if my mom or dad was like, oh, what's that out there? And looked out the window, and there was like footprints in the snow on the roof. They had taken a potato and cut a little like ridge in it and turned it into a reindeer hoof so that I would believe that Santa's sleigh did in fact land on our roof. You can understand why I believed in Santa until I was 14. Like, that shit was real. The next order of business is the dry ingredients. I've seen a lot of people, and let's be honest, I've done it myself, dig into a bag of flour with a measuring cup. In reality, the way it should be done is more gently, just like lightly adding it so that it's nice and fluffy like powdered snow. This will be a more accurate measurement of your flour. The difference can be as much as a tablespoon or two, which can make a big difference in baking. We need 2.5 of these for the recipe. So there's 2 cups, a half a cup, and then we're just gonna add some other very standard dry ingredients. So 1 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, a half of a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then 2 whole teaspoons of diamond kosher salt. And I'm whisking this all together just until it's well combined. And then before I go get my butter, I'm going to make my buttermilk mixture, which is simply 3/4 a cup of buttermilk and 1 teaspoon of toasted sesame oil. So I'm just whisking this to kind of incorporate the sesame oil. I think if you ask anyone who knows me and knows the way I cook, they would say she's the Caesar girl. I have been obsessed with Caesar salads for as long as I can remember. It has been a lifelong journey of perfecting the recipe for the Caesar salad. That's what most people would associate with me. That and Molly loves salt. Now we're gonna do the pinch and smash, which is adding all of the cold butter to the dry ingredients. And I'm gonna use my fingers to pinch the butter into little pieces as quickly as possible because the heat of your hands will warm the butter until all of the butter has been smashed into the flour and there are no pieces of butter that are larger than like a fat lentil or a small pea. So now I'm all pinched and smashed and I'm making a well right here in the middle of the bowl. And I'm going to pour in my buttermilk mixture and just using circular motion, kind of start to incorporate the flour into the wet ingredients. So I'm rubbing a little bit of flour on my hands just so that things don't stick. And I'm gonna kind of start to bring this together. I'm gonna turn it out onto this clean, dry countertop with a light sprinkling of flour so it doesn't stick. So then just a couple of more kneads just so that I feel like we can start to pat it down into a square. So we've got a square. I'm cutting it into 4 equal pieces. And then I'm stacking those 4 pieces and smashing down. And that's gonna basically force layers into these biscuits. And now that I've smashed, I'm just gonna work this into a 4 by 8 inch rectangle. And I'm gonna cut this into 8 perfect squares. And I'm gonna let these chill for like 10 minutes, just to make sure that they're cold as they can be when they go in the oven. I've been fortunate to have a lot of like really strong female cooks around me. I was outnumbered by a long shot in most of the restaurants I worked in, but I think this like second phase of my career post restaurants and working in food media, I've sought out women to guide me whose journeys I can follow, and those people have been such inspirations to me. Biscuits are chilly, and now right before they go in the oven, we're gonna crust them in sesame seeds. And so I'm just gonna brush the tops of each of them with a little bit more buttermilk, and then they're each gonna get dipped into toasted sesame seeds, a little sesame dunk. I'm gonna go into a 425-degree oven for, I think like 20 minutes, but we'll just keep an eye on it. So I'm gonna serve these biscuits with chive butter. I'm cutting this again into pieces just to make it easier to incorporate. And I'm actually gonna nuke this in the microwave so that's a little bit softer, but you can also just leave it out until it softens. Okay, 10 seconds, all you need. So we have soft butter, and then I'm taking 1 bunch of chives and I'm just gonna thinly slice it. Chives right in. And then working these together with the back of a spoon until it's all well incorporated. Something that I have come to realize is that I have an obligation to use my platform to bring other people up with me. I have a recipe club. A new program that I'm starting to roll out in that club is to have a guest chef program where I am periodically inviting other chefs to come in and contribute a recipe so that it exposes my fan base to all of these other creators who they might not otherwise come across. Before we take the biscuits out, I'm gonna make a little bit of sesame salt. So the remaining few tablespoons of toasted sesame seeds here, I'm just adding like a few big pinches of flaky salt into that. And then this way we can season the biscuits with a little bit of sesame salt. Let's check on the biscuits. Here we go. My 2 favorites. These little cuties. Then it's simply a matter of cracking it open. Oh, so tender. A little bit of this chive butter, and then a little bit of the sesame salt. And that's kind of the concept of the biscuit there. My goal in life is to teach as many people as possible to cook. So until I feel like I have touched the kitchens of enough people around the world, I don't feel my work is done, no matter how many TV shows or merchandise drops or books I write. If I haven't taught someone how to do at least something in their kitchen, then the work's not done. So I guess I have to do that. I have to touch every kitchen in the world.